Hi, Misha here, and it's time for another Colt AR-15 video. Okay, so the real reason I just really wanted to shoot my AR-15-A4 again when we went to the range last. Right now, as I record this, it's raining outside and dreary, but we had a sunny day a week ago. So did that. I've had the M4A1 out recently. Thought it was time to let the M16A4 clone shine. And I have changed it up a bit since I think most of you saw it last. That, and there's been a lot of talk about Colt over the last 6 months, and rifles are relatively hard to get right now. So I thought we would kind of just revisit the M16A4, AR-15A4, kind of do a frequently asked questions about it. Also compare it with the Palmetto State Armory build that Jay did, using their kit and a Bushmaster lower. Kind of talking about why buy Colt, or maybe why not buy Colt. And then also talk about a few variations that have appeared over the last 5-6 years in the AR-15A4 lineup. So, with that out of the way, let's run a mag through this, then we'll come back to the table and get started. AR-15A4. Good old AR strong. I've had this rifle more or less since they came out. I purchased it in the first year or so they were on the market. Colt had teased the AR-15A4 for a little time, and it got a lot of us excited because it's a military style rifle. Really, you had the SP1 and then the Sporter 2 series in the 80s, but then you had the assault weapons ban in the 90s, and then when Colt came back after the ban period, they were mostly focusing on their carbine line, which makes sense because that was more or less the modern military. They still made rifles, but they tended to be in their match target series. But this was a full military rifle, except for, of course, semi-auto only. And one of the questions I get, especially if I have an AR-15A4 up on Gunbroker, is what is an AR-15A4? Now, I know most of you know it, but, you know, there are people that don't. And we've answered it in several videos, and I'm sure we'll continue to have to answer it, because, yeah. Well, basically, it's this rifle here. This is a Colt M16A2 upper and butt stock put on a Colt. Actually, it's another A4 lower, but Colt lower. This was the quote-unquote improved version of the M16 adopted between 1982 and 1985, designed to make the weapon more durable and more accurate. It also made it heavier. Some differences between the original A1 and the A2. A2 has a longer fixed buttstock. They also redesigned the trapdoor style a bit. They went to the new style of pistol grip all you are familiar with. They put right side markings on the lower with a notch safety. Wasn't an ambi safety, but at least you could look on the right side of the gun and see what you were set on. They went to a very easy windage and elevation adjustable rear sight with 2 peeps. Still have a fixed carry handle though. They reinforced the lower receiver at the front pivot pin and the back. Probably one of the most important changes, they went to a new pattern of handguard, round handguard with heat shield inside. Not only were these handguards more durable than the triangle ones featured on the Vietnam era guns, they were also interchangeable. You know, the Vietnam guns, you had a left side and a right side. With this new style, you have a top and a bottom, but they are the same piece, so you don't have to have the right piece. The A2 has a new front sight. The tower was slightly altered for it, but it still took the same bayonet lug, originally issued with the M7, later the M9. We also went to a new pattern of birdcage flash hider. Basically, it's the same as an A1, but it has a solid bottom, which kind of acts as a de facto muzzle brake. It also keeps dust from jetting up. And probably the other big difference with the A2, they went to a heavier profile barrel. It's thicker. Now under the handguards, it's the same profile as an A1, but once you get to the side block, it poofs out quite a bit, making this whole front end stiffer. And they switched from a 1 in 12 twist to a 1 in 7. Also, with the A2, 30-round mags were very much the standard. And this became the replacement for the A1. They started to see pretty widespread use in the first Gulf War, amongst the Army and Marine Corps especially. But the Navy and the Air Force had some as well. Now, one difference that I can't really show you because this is a semi-auto, the A1 was safe, single shot, semi, and fully automatic. Hold down the trigger, it runs until it's out. With the A2, they switched from that to safe. Cat. Say hi to Foxy. Yeah. Picking her up while I can get her. But anyway, they switched from that to single shot and burst, 3-round burst. Let me put the cat outside. I'll be right back. Say bye, Foxy. Sorry about that. I have to get her when I can when she's out here in my workroom because she knows she's not supposed to be here. But yeah, that was another change, the fired mode. And the M16A2 was the standard until the M4 started to replace it in the late 90s and early 2000s. At least in the Army. For the U.S. Marine Corps, though, they decided to stick with the rifle, hence the M16A4. Colt first tested this in 96, 97. It was tried out between 97 and 98 and was starting to go into service with the Marine Corps and limited service with a few other branches around the turn of the millennium. Now, interestingly, the Marine Corps kept the M16A4 rifle rather than going to the M4. Now, they did have a few M4s, M4A1s, that they would use to replace some pistols, but this was their standard issue rifle, meaning it still had the 20-inch barrel, same profile as the A2. In fact, everything's the same as the A2, except for one thing. The A4 now has a Picatinny rail cut as part of the upper receiver and can come with a removable carry handle. That's the only difference. So we go from a fixed carry handle on the A2 to either no carry handle on a pick rail or a removable carry handle on a pick rail on the A4. That's it. Now these railed handguards are actually a further variation that we'll get into in just a second. But yeah, that's the big difference. And so the Marine Corps would start to phase out some of its A2s, but actually would hang on to them for quite a long time, but keeping the A4 in frontline use. And it would remain the standard in the Marine Corps until late 2015 when they would finally switch over to the M4/M4A1. Before we go any further, what about the M16A3? This kind of confuses people because there are guns marked AR-15-A3 and they tend to be Picatinny rail flat tops, especially back in the day. Well, in military parlance, the A3 was the exact same gun as the A2 here, but instead of having safe semi-burst, they had safe semi-full auto. So they had an M16A1 style fire control group. And the Navy was part of the largest single user of the A3. So it did exist, they didn't skip. But yeah, the A4 was standard for about 15 years in the Marine Corps. And what did they look like? What did the gun consist of? Well, like I said, the railed handguards were not, strictly speaking, standard or absolute on the A4, but they were very common. When added, they turned it into, in military parlance, the M16A4 MWS Modular Weapon System rifle. And basically, it's just what they consider an adaptive rail system, ARS, or sometimes written as RIS or RAS, doesn't matter. You know how AR-15s are with all this stuff. Made by Knight's Armament Company, KAC, K-A-C, M5. Basically just a rifle version of what you see on a lot of M4s. Now this is where my knowledge starts to wane, because a lot of what you see in the field are from pictures, which I can't see, and a lot of it has to do with visual stuff, optics, lasers, lights, things that I can't use. From the factory, there are 3 basic configurations that have been purchased by the U.S. government, some for the Marine Corps, some for private contractors, some for allies. You have a version that comes with the KAC rail already installed and the Maytag adjustable mil-spec backup iron sight. You have another version that comes with a carry handle instead of the backup sight, which mine's a little loose. I need to tighten that down. I had it off the other day. Oh well. Anyway, you have a carry handle and the rails. And there's a final version, the basic version, that has a carry handle and the plastic handguards like you saw on the A2. And this is what the AR-15-A4 from Colt ships as. So it's your basic C-type configuration, the cheapest with the iron sight carry handle and plastic handguards. FN USA, Fabrique Nationale, also has made the M16A4 under contract. And while they do semi-auto A4 types, they've also done a true M16A4 style in their collector series. Colt has done that style for the M4 carbine, but not for the rifle. So, me, myself, and I here. What have I set it up? Well, this is a Colt A4 rifle. I did get a set of genuine Knight's Armament handguards with grip and covers. I bought one of the balloon ones. I do have a Harris bipod, which is something. The sling and the single mag pouch on the side are genuine surplus from the surplus store that came back from Iraq, as is the cleaning kit that you can't see in the buttstock. The mag in it at the moment is actually a Beretta mag, but you know, standard mags. So that's where I went genuine, stuff that I can see use. Oh, I also have a real Colt Maytag backup sight that I need to tighten down. But when it comes to the optics, as anyone who follows the channel knows, I have a Chinese knockoff of a Trijicon ACOG. Of course, the real ones would have a real ACOG, even with a little RMR on top. And Jay does have a couple of real ACOGs, because he can use them. And while I like making authentic replicas, come on, with me, yeah, you would rightly judge me as being way too fluid with money if I was buying real ACOGs. Hey, at least I have a good backup iron sight on it, so, pull it off, whatever. It's not a bad Chinese knockoff. It is 4-power. It is fiber optic illuminated. It does the job. It looks the part. And likewise, even though you really can't get the ANPEC 2 laser designator that the military uses because of the military grade laser, I just have a Chinese knockoff laser light combo on the side. It came with a pressure switch. It's actually a pretty neat little unit. But, yeah, I'm not gonna waste money on something, again, I can't really use. And, some of the Chinese stuff's not half bad. So that's how I have mine set up. Very happy with it. The newest additions are this sight here. I've also, it's on the other side, but I've got the sling strapped on and stuff. Pretty close to Marine Corps configured gun. So, with that said, why do I have a Colt AR15-A4 instead of just building one? Because there's something about Colts, and to be fair, when these were on the market and available, they didn't cost a whole lot more. People talk about Colts as if they cost an arm and a leg. Well, maybe today, but back in the day, one of these would cost you about $950 to $1,000, maybe $1,100 in a pinch. And to build an equivalent gun would run you minimum $600 and up to $800 very easily. So why not spend a little more, $200, $250 maybe, and get a Colt? To be fair, the FN Collector Series guns were $1,500, so, but of course they did come already done. And since these Knights Armament quad rails were about $100 as blims, it was an easy call. So why else besides the thing? Well, the pony on the side will never really hurt you on the value department. When it comes to other manufacturers, they are what they are, but a Colt is the original, is always going to fetch a little more. And in times of panic, people kind of look for the Colts. That's just how it is. It's been that way since the SP1s, and they are the original. They have the TDP, as you hear ad nauseum. They're just, yeah. Beyond that, while the finish on Colts is military, internally they're usually very polished, very smooth. The bolt travel is always nice and smooth. The trigger is usually among the better military triggers, not too gritty or heavy. Upper to lower play is usually pretty minimal. A lot of people think that no play at all is a good thing. Honestly, with a military gun for reliability, a little play is fine, even desirable, just to make sure all the parts line up, and if there's any grit or dirt that gets in there, it doesn't gum up the action, because if you make it too tight, you run the risk of that, plus friction. Also, that they're not cutting corners, at least back when I bought mine. For example, it has a C-marked carrier. It has a military buffer and spring, a military stock. You'd be amazed how often cheap buffers break. And if you keep the plastic handguards on, they're the military handguards with a heat shield. And if you keep the carry handle on, it's a military carry handle. Again, you'd be amazed how often cheap carry handles break. On top of that, you do get a true military grade chrome-lined barrel that has been magnetic particle tested. And also, the bolt has been magnetic particle tested. So that's about as good as it gets, frankly. So they go through all the same testing as a military gun. My gun has been 100% reliable with steel and brass. Here it is, firing with Wolf. AR15-A4. No problems with anything. I don't put Tula in it, but that's not because of the gun. I just don't like Tula. But I will shoot wolf or bear in it occasionally. Now, Jay is a pretty skilled builder because he takes his time and he's a perfectionist and he researches it. He's also becoming a pretty half-competent gunsmith with a drill press and things. And so a while back he purchased a Virgin Bushmaster lower and one of the Palmetto State Arms A4 kits with FN barrel. Here is his gun running with brass case. PSA A4. So it does fine with brass. However, when it comes to steel and some other ammos, this is what happens. And also, you'll see the same gun using the same ammo even out of the same magazine. PSA A4.
Click. It's not kicking back far enough. Click. It's even worse with the wolf. Click. 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 That is not going to cycle, so I'm going to switch to your A4 real quick.
Okay.
We're still good. Just fine. We're good.
So yeah, Jay's gun has trouble with certain ammo types, whereas the Colt just works. At first we thought his gun might be under gas with a spec gas port, or maybe just a dirty gas port. But actually, and he's still in the middle of diagnosing it, and he'll make his own video, but it looks like perhaps Palmetto State shipped him either a knockoff buffer and spring, or simply the wrong buffer and spring. So it seems like his difficulty might be back in the buttstock. And that's something you always have to tinker with when you do a build, or at least you run the chance of having to tinker to get a build to run right. But even factory guns, when you're talking, I don't want to say low end, because some of them are damn good. Let's say entry level or economy level, like Palmetto State. You might get one that runs awesome, and then your friend likes yours, buys it, and his has to go back a couple of times. Maybe even has to be replaced. And I'm not just picking on Palmetto State. I'm just mentioning them because they're kind of in the public mind right now. The same thing could have been said for DPMS, Bushmaster. I won't say that for FN. FN seems to always turn out a good product, but then again, their prices are the same as Colts. It seems like if you get that economy level, say $5,000 to $600, you may or may not run into trouble. If you bump it up to around $1,000 for an FN or a Colt or whatnot, you have a very good expectation that it's going to run with any ammo type, any mag type, and run well right out of the box. And that's another reason I really like Colts. However, it's not all roses. There are some issues with Colts. And part of that gets into kind of variations that have happened with the A4 over the years. We're nearing the end, I promise. You know, I do set out initially to make short videos, but maybe something's wrong with me, maybe I don't talk fast enough, but I end up wanting to tell you guys things. Now, anything I tell you, take with a grain of salt. Please verify for yourself. I am always learning, and I do make mistakes. But that said, I really just wanted to shoot this gun, and anytime I shoot a gun and I have a good experience, it gets me excited about it, and so I just want to talk about it. Generally speaking, the Colt AR15-A4 has been a very successful gun. They run well, and generally have been very consistent, but there have been some weird factory variations and differences. One thing that bugs some people, especially like Chris Bartacci, is these come with M4 feed ramps in the receiver extension, the barrel extension, and in the receiver. It's not exactly mil-spec to A4 as far as I know. Now, does it hurt anything? No, it doesn't. But it isn't, strictly speaking, mil-spec. The reason they did that, so they can use the same uppers in their M4s that they do in the A4s. So, it's up to you if that really bugs you. It doesn't really bug me, but I can understand why it might bug some. Another difference, most of them do come with the military ambidextrous safety. But there was a batch or two, that came out without it. I could see that being a little irksome, and Colt doesn't tell you, and obviously if you get one without it, you're just, you get what you get. That's kind of the nature of things with a lot of these companies, especially military contractors. Again, most I've had come in, I would say well over 90% have the ambi safety. But we've had batches that did not have it. So that is one variation you might find. Another variation has to do with the front sight base. Some have the F-marked front sight base, which means it's ever so slightly taller to work with the Picatinny rail in the rear, and thus the correct sight base, but some came out without the F. Now, practically speaking, it's not the end of the world. Worst case, if you do have a M16A2 sight base, you can just put a taller sight post in to compensate. Others have said even the non-F ones are still tall, they just don't have the F marking. I haven't verified. Again, we're getting into things that I really can't know much about, so just passing on what people have claimed. Either way, it's fixable, it's not an end-of-the-world thing, but it is a markings thing. And that's a big one. Whenever I would be selling these routinely, that would be the number one question. Does it have an F-marked front sight base? Because people really wanted to see that. Another weird one that popped up around 2014, 2015, were barrel markings. This should say 7-in-1, government profile, yada yada. Most do. However, there was one batch that accidentally came out of the factory marked 1-in-9 H-bar. Very confusing, because they were actually still 1-in-7, and they were not H-bar. H-bar means it would be heavier under the handguards. Now, they were still literally, in serious terms, government profile. They tapered down. They were just mismarked at the factory. So, yeah. I don't know if those are going to be collectible or undesirable. I had some people very confused, even very angry before, because I thought they had a heavy barrel until I had them take off the handguards. And interestingly, I don't think I had any customers return them and exchange them. Most did end up hanging on to them. And that's really about it. As far as I can recall, most of the A4s I've had did have the C-marked carrier, but I'm sure, Colt being Colt, there are some out there that do not have the C-marked carriers. Also, they don't ship with a whole lot. They come with one mag pull, 30-round mag, manual, cable lock, and a typical sealed Colt accessory pack. So you don't get a lot, and they just come in a basic cardboard box. Early ones came in the blue bag, but much more recently, they've come in the clear plastic bag, as have all Colts. So those are the variations. What do you think? Well, how about some final thoughts, and then we'll wrap this up, and I'll get back to my rainy old day activities. PSA A4.
Brass ammo this time.
Which brand?
This is Wolf Gold. There.
Alright, my SP1 just had to make a guest appearance. The SP1 rifle, again 20-inch, although much lighter, was the first semi-auto AR ever offered in the world, dating all the way back to, well, technically 1963, but on the market 64. And it was the first kind of evil black rifle, as we jokingly refer to them today, or modern sporting rifle, MSR, if you want to be politically correct, that I ever shot. So it has a special place. Now, not this one, but my dad had one from the 70s that he kept under his bed, and as a young kid I remember thinking that's the Rambo gun, or something similar. I was probably a little too young to watch things like Apocalypse Now. Platoon, that came out later, I guess. Yeah, that came out later. Anyway, so the basic AR-15 rifles always had a special place in my heart, because as a kid this was just the pinnacle of cool. And this was modern when I was a kid, along with the A2. So when the A4 came out 30 years later, it gave me those same kind of feels, you know? It harkened back to that childhood. Now, it was more modern. It was definitely heavier, but it still imbued that same sense as a rifle. I like the M4 carbine. I like carbines, but they feel like a carbine. Sometimes you want something that feels like a battle rifle, a successor to the M1 Garand, the M14, the FAL even. And a carbine with its 14.5 or even 11.5-inch barrel just doesn't. On top of that, the SP1 is a semi-auto version of the original M16 slab side. It's really a 602 type. Even late SP1s still imbue all that. And that was the first one in U.S. military service, of course. Well, the AR-15-A4 is a semi-automatic version from the original manufacturer of the last AR-15 type rifle to go into U.S. military service, and it probably will be, aside from, you know, things like the Mark 12. But I'm talking standard issue infantry weapon. This is probably the last one. And again, the Army, aside from a few purchases for specialists, this was a Marine Corps gun. Now, as I said at the beginning of the video, about 3,000 years ago, in October 2015, they authorized the replacement of their M16A4s with M4, M4A1s. But there are still some M16A4s, even in 2020, in the Corps. They're used by reservist type troops, non-frontline specialists, second line defense type things. So they still exist. I mean, the Marine Corps is not going to throw anything away that still halfway works. Heck, I know that they had plenty of A2s, at least up until 2015. No finish on them, but they still worked. So this really nicely bookends the whole series, from original, when it was lightweight and modern, to when the gun was kind of starting to look traditional and also got a lot heavier. So why buy one of these over a carbine? Well, a lot of people do find the fixed buttstock more comfortable than a collapsing or folding stock. It's certainly rock solid. You also get a good cheek weld. And if not, you can always put a cheek riser on it. You do get a very large storage compartment in here for anything. I keep a cleaning kit and a sight tool in it, but you can keep batteries or what have you. It's reasonably watertight. All of the receiver parts are the standard AR-15s. In fact, Colt even ships these with standard M16 mil-spec bolt carriers. Even the fire control group parts have the markings from mil-spec, like on the hammer. Of course, there's some auto things, and there's the web inside to keep a full auto sear from going in. This long barrel, as well as longer sight radius and ease of scope mounting, gives you much better potential accuracy and better practical range distance. And the overall heavier weight of the gun takes an already light recoiling cartridge, 5.56 by 45 NATO, 223 Remington and civilian, and makes it basically a 22 kitten. I mean, there's no recoil at all. As you saw at the beginning, the most you might get is a little, AR buffer spoing. Of course, that also could have been for my mag on the side. The downsides, though, and frankly for a civilian, they're not that important, not compared to a trooper, a soldier. It is longer. It's just under 40 inches, with no way to compact it. It's obviously heavier. When they started with the M16, it was a slim young thing, under 7 pounds. Even for the rifle. And when they kind of finished out, when it was middle-aged and retiring, it put on a few pounds around the midsection and whatnot, clocking in at about 8.5 pounds, give or take what you've got kitted up with. Some of the kitted out guns can top 10 pounds quite easily. But that's modern guns for you. The M4 is not exactly svelte either. But it does weigh more than an M4 or any other carbine for the most part. So that's one thing to also consider. So weight and length, negative. Range, accuracy, and probably better shooting comfort thanks to the longer handguard options and buttstock. That's another thing too. Because you have rifle length handguards, you do have more potential real estate to use. You don't have to use the Knight's Armament M5 like I did. There's tons of rails out there. You can even go to a low profile block and take the rails all the way out to the muzzle if you honestly need 20 inches of rail. And finally, reliability. Rifles are more reliable than carbines. That was true with the M16 versus the CAR-15, the XM177, and it's true today with the A4 versus the M4. Part of it is the rifle buffer, more space. You don't have to mess with standard H2, blah, blah, blah. There's just rifle buffer for the most part. But really, it's the gas system. Now the distance between the muzzle and the gas port is the same on the M16A4 as it is on the M4. The dwell time is the same, but behind it you have a longer gas tube, which just gives more time to cycle the action, and the action is less violent. The M4 has to teeter on the edge of being overgassed to work, whereas a rifle can be right in the sweet spot. It's a little more forgiving, so that not only means lower recoil, it also means your parts will show wear and tear slower. In 2002, the Marine Corps tested their A4, right as they were starting to use it in combat after the war and terror began, against the M4, and they found that the A4 malfunctioned 1/3 as much as the M4. And then further tests done by the Marine Corps, Colt, and even the Army between 2004 and 2006 gave an average mean round count between jams in an A4 of 5,000 rounds. That's not too shabby. Most guns need their barrels replaced between 15 and 25,000 rounds, depending on your standards, even 10,000 if you're really wanting to keep accuracy. So you're looking at between 2 and 5 stoppages over the entire barrel's lifetime. Now the M4, especially with the A1s, with the newer variants, have greatly improved reliability, but they still are quite far behind the good old rifle. So yeah, for reliability, durability, longevity, the rifle is the ticket. But you trade that for weight, size, and as time goes on, there will probably be fewer and fewer parts made for these. Now you can put on an M4 collapsing buttstock. In fact, the Marine Corps started authorizing M4 stocks, Car 15 type stocks, on their A4s as far back as 2014 for smaller stature people. So you can do that, but when you do, just make sure you have the buffer and spring set up properly, because it can cause issues if you're not careful. Because again, the barrel, the dwell, the gas tube is different. Alrighty, I appreciate you staying with me. I had a lot of fun doing this one. If you can't tell, it really is one of my favorite guns to shoot. I don't know how many rounds he put through this, but not a few. Over 1,000 for sure. Probably 2. So yeah, that kind of is everything I can think of about the M16A4 and AR15A4, in my opinion about why to buy or maybe not to buy a Colt. It's up to you if you think it's worth the money. Of course, right now, in March of 2020, Colts are hard to get and bring in crazy money, so it's really up to you if you want to spend $1,500, $2,000 for one of these. Personally, I probably wouldn't, but back when you could pick one up for around $1,000, to me it just seemed worth a little extra over something like a Palmetto State or Bushmaster. The only other kind of gun in the running for me would be something from FN, but they also just make really damn good guns. Well, anyway, we'd love to hear about your A4 builds, or clones, or guns, or just anything. Let's talk AR-15 rifles. So with that said, on behalf of Jay, this is Misha, and we will both catch you very soon next time. Speaking of time, it's time for dinner.